From the time I was a little girl, I couldn't feel fear. That heart-pounding, palms sweating, shaking fear that I hear so many people describe is not something I can relate to, even in the littlest bit. No movie has ever made me jump or cry out. I've never felt what it feels like to have my heart pound in terror. This might not sound like a problem, and yes, there are worse ones to have, but it is a strange one to have. I've never felt a moment of panic when walking down a deserted street at night and heard footsteps behind me. My friends and family have invested a lot of time and energy into trying to scare me, but it never works. My big brother Kenny has devoted his life practically to proving that I can get scared, but he's yet to succeed. Kenny's 4 years older than me, and when I was 12 and he was 16, he said he was going to get me to jump from a movie if it killed him. He spent hour after hour poring over the scariest movies. He researched, Googled, and watched movie after movie, trying to find the perfect ones that were most likely to get a scare out of me. He put a lot of thought into his list, I must say. One night when my parents were away, Kenny said we were going to have a scary movie marathon, and that if I didn't jump from at least one, he would finally believe me that fear was an emotion I just wasn't privy to. First up on the list was The Exorcist. This was an old movie, way old. Kenny said that it was voted one of the scariest movies of all time. It was about a kid who was possessed by the devil. It was strange, graphic, and yeah, I could see that Kenny was scared. He hadn't seen it before and kept looking over at me. The movie was kind of gross, I'll say, but it didn't make me feel anything even close to fear. Not that I know what that would even feel like. After the movie, Kenny turned it off and said, well, that wasn't a success. The next movie was Children of the Corn, another cult classic that was regarded as very scary. Nothing. After that, we worked our way through Poltergeist, Carrie, The Blair Witch Project, and ended the next morning with the new It. It was weird watching all of these movies that I knew most people would jump at, cover their eyes, or hide under the covers, but yet I felt nothing. I could laugh in comedies, cry in sad movies, get excited, happy, sad, but fear never came. Kenny, with his bloodshot eyes from staying up movie binging all night, got up, threw his hands up in the air and said, I give up. I guess I have to officially believe you. You can't feel fear. He went up to his room and napped the day away. We didn't tell my parents about our horror fest, and although Kenny said he wasn't going to try any longer, I could tell he was hatching a new plan. The next day, Kenny sat across from me at the table and said, so I know you weren't scared in any of those movies, but what about being in scary situations? I think we should try that next. He asked me what truly scary situations have I found myself in, and after thinking about what others might find scary, I realized I couldn't really come up with any examples. I'd led a pretty safe and sheltered life. He asked me if I was brave enough to try some scary situations and see if I felt anything. I said, sure, why not? I don't really know why this bothers you so much, but I have always wondered what it would feel like to feel legit fear. I asked him what he had in mind, but he said he thought the surprise element might help, so I didn't know what to expect. He said we'd start on the weekend. That weekend, he woke me up early and told me to get dressed and to dress warm. It was fall and there was a chill in the air. He had pulled our bikes out of the garage and we hopped on. I followed him down the trails to a park we often went to as a family to have hot dog roasts and hang out. I wondered what we were doing here. I saw Kenny looking up and got an inkling of what he was planning. Over the river, there was an old train trestle bridge that was still being used. I remember being little and waiting for a train and then running along underneath the bridge as far as we could until the train sped past us into the distance. Kenny told me to follow him, and then he started to scramble up the dirt hill towards the bridge. I followed behind him, slightly slower, as he was just bigger, stronger, and faster than me. I was almost at the top when my sneakers couldn't get traction and I slipped backwards. I started to slide down and Kenny yelled at me to grab onto a branch. There were lots of odd little shrubs growing out of the hill, so I grabbed onto one and was able to pull myself up. Kenny was laughing and said, "Scared yet?" "Nope," I said. I don't think my heart had even sped up a little. I made it to the top and followed Kenny along the tracks. When the tracks went over the bridge, there was a sheer drop down into the river below. It was high, and there were signs everywhere that no one was allowed up there. I calmly looked around and asked what he wanted me to do. He said he wanted me to stand up there until a train came. He said I should jump to the side, obviously, before the train actually hit me or had to stop. He said that one of his scariest moments growing up was being on that bridge with his friends and being dared to stand still until the train got to a certain point. He had chickened out and jumped off before that point, but he wondered if I could do it. He threw a big rock on the ground to mark the point he wanted me to stand until, and said that if I didn't feel fear with a train barreling towards me, he would be surprised. He wished me luck and shimmied back down the hill to watch from below. It seemed like forever before we heard a train approaching way off in the distance. Kenny gave me a thumbs up from below. I looked ahead and could see the train coming. I stood there and didn't feel anything. The train got louder and louder. The train was blowing its whistle like crazy, and as it got closer, I looked down and could see the fear on Kenny's face, but he saw nothing on mine. The line with the rock was reached, and I calmly stepped aside while the train went hurtling by me down the tracks. Kenny was already scrambling back up the hill and stood there in disbelief when he reached the top. "How were you not scared?" he asked. I just shrugged my shoulders and said, "Search me." I definitely hadn't felt anything at all. Next, we headed to our local skate park. This place was hardcore. There were kids on scooters, skateboards, and BMX bikes. Kenny took me up to the biggest jump and asked me how I felt about attempting it. Again, I shrugged my shoulders indifferently. He produced some padding from his backpack and told me to put it on. I could tell he didn't think I would do the jump. I was no stunt guy, but I felt fine to try it. I backed up on the bike and pedaled. I cruised over the jump and soared through the air. I was high, so high, and came down with a crash. My bike seemed to flip over on top of me and my leg was caught in the wheel. Kenny ran down and asked if I was okay. He asked if I'd been scared, but again, nothing. "Yup, if you were scared, you would just have chickened out for sure," said Kenny. "Wow, either you have jumbo coconut balls, or you really can't feel fear." "I told you," I said. So he admitted defeat and said we may as well go home. We decided to make our way home on the bike trails along the river. It was late fall and the river looked frozen and serene. It had gotten cold this year earlier than usual. We were riding along the trail when we heard a weird sound, kind of like a mix between a cry and a whine. We stopped on our bikes and looked around. We heard it again. Following the sound, we could see a little cat in the middle of the ice. The poor thing looked terrified. Its eyes were wide, and it seemed too scared to move or too cold. I wondered how it had even gotten out there. Kenny hopped off his bike and said we had to do something. I watched as he approached the river's edge. He tested the ice with a foot and then slowly started approaching the cat. I heard a crack and saw a line forming from the water's edge to where my brother was creeping forward. I called to him just before the crack made the ice shatter. He was able to grab the cat and make it back just in time. What amazed me was the fact that my heart was beating, and I realized for the first time ever that I was scared. I guess that was the key, to be scared for someone else. To watch more animated story videos like this, hit that subscribe button. And tell us in the comments section what you thought about this story.